It's just after 8:30 p.m. On June 8, 1953, in the Beecher district north of Flint, and Pearl Chapman is pulling into his driveway on Coldwater Road. Behind him, a violent F5 tornado nearly half a mile wide is bearing down on the neighborhood, its roar drowning out everything else. Chapman gets one look before he's moving, yelling for the boy in the garage to get to the basement. In the next 4 blocks of this single road, 113 people are about to die. To understand how a tornado like this could tear through a town of 8,000 people with almost no warning at all, you have to go back to the weather map drawn up that afternoon. By early June 8th, a surface low was digging in over Minnesota's Arrowhead region, an unusually strong system for so early in the season this far north. A warm front trailed south across the Great Lakes, with an occluded front pressing in behind it from the west, and southerly winds were dragging Gulf moisture nearly 400 miles out of its normal range, the kind of humid, unstable air mass the upper Midwest almost never sees in early June. It was a setup more at home over Oklahoma than Michigan, and it wasn't isolated to one storm. 12 tornadoes would touch down across the eastern Great Lakes that single evening, 8 of them in Michigan alone, part of a larger system already on track to reach Massachusetts by nightfall. In 1953, there was no such thing as a routine tornado warning. Doppler radar didn't exist, and the Weather Bureau had no mechanism to alert a town before a funnel was already on the ground. The only real-time record of what was coming came minutes after the fact, when the Flint station logged an unconfirmed tornado reported 2 m Flushing heading east, possibly hitting Flint 2033E. By the time that line was typed, the tornado had already been down for several minutes. For Beecher, there would be no siren and no watch, only the sight of it. The setup was strange in another way, too. Violent tornadoes were supposed to be a Great Plains problem, a springtime hazard for Oklahoma and Kansas and Texas, not something the shores of Lake Huron had to reckon with. Southeast Michigan had never confirmed an F5 before June 8, 1953, and it hasn't confirmed one since. The tornado touched down at roughly 8:30 p.m. in Mount Morris Township, near the intersection of Webster and Coldwater Roads, northwest of Flint. For its first mile and a half, it had only open farmland to work with, tracking east at a deliberate 35 miles an hour, slow enough that homes in its path would sit under it for the better part of a minute, not the few seconds most tornadoes allow. Then it crossed onto Coldwater Road and found Beecher, and the funnel planted itself over the dense grid of small frame houses and began to route. Witnesses described a black, half-mile wide wedge trailing smaller subvortices, with fireballs flashing inside the debris cloud as power lines arced and shorted in the wind. Chapman and the boy make it down the basement stairs seconds before it hits. It sounds, he'll say later, like 10 freight trains coming down Coldwater Road. A few miles away, outside Wally's Drive-In, 22-year-old Charlie Gage, freshly home from Korea, feels the wind shift and looks up to see debris cutting sideways across the lot. He isn't in the tornado's direct path. He'll spend the rest of the night watching the sky to the north light up with what looks like sheet lightning but isn't. But the worst of it was still ahead, 4 blocks deep in the heart of the Coldwater Corridor, where the tornado was about to set its full weight down on the most densely packed streets in Beecher. Near the North Flint Drive-In, the tornado reaches out its own outer edge and catches the evening crowd mid-picture. Patrons scramble into their cars and floor it for the exit, some slamming into each other in the panic, others turning the wrong way out of the lot and driving straight into the funnel's path. Cars still parked on the far side of the lot are flipped and stacked like crushed cans. The theater itself, by chance, comes through with only minor damage, one of the night's stranger footnotes. Pedro Gattaca is working his shift at a General Motors plant when word starts moving down the line that Beecher has been hit. He leaves with a crowd of other auto workers, driving north through debris-choked streets toward Kurtz Avenue. What he finds when he gets there is a poured concrete slab where his house had stood that morning. Nothing else. His wife Cecilia, 8 months pregnant with their third child, is gone, along with their 2 small children and a niece who'd been staying with them. Thomas Gensel doesn't have to drive anywhere. He's already home on Kurtz when the house comes apart around him, his wife Vanessa and their 4 children scattered into the wreckage in the same instant. Rescue crews pull him out alive. Alone, between them, the Gattaca and Gensel households will account for 10 of the tornado's dead, the 2 heaviest single losses of the night, and a measure of just how completely the funnel had rooted itself over these 2 blocks alone. But the tornado wasn't finished with Coldwater Road. It chewed straight through the commercial strip and rooted itself over Beecher High School, collapsing the gymnasium in a direct hit. Nearly every home for a mile on both sides of the corridor between Clio Road and Kurtz Avenue was, in the words of tornado researcher Thomas Grazoulis, virtually obliterated. That obliteration is what puts the Flint-Beecher tornado at F5, the top of the Fujita scale. Winds estimated between 261 and 318 miles an hour, more than double hurricane force. Automobile-sized debris was thrown well over 100 meters, landing like scattered meteorites blocks from where it started. Mature trees were stripped bare of bark. And because most of the homes in its path were modest post-war frame construction, built fast and cheap for auto workers' families. Survey teams had little trouble assigning the rating. When a house disappears down to its foundation, there's no ambiguity left for a damage crew to weigh. Whole stretches of Kurtz and Coldwater were left with nothing standing but chimneys, furniture and shredded lumber scattered like the contents of an emptied box. But even at the top of the scale, the human cost kept climbing after the wind died down. Search crews worked through the debris field into the night. At one collapsed house on West Coldwater, a rescuer spotted a tiny arm reaching up out of the rubble. 14-month-old Diane Shreve, the 120th body pulled from the wreckage. State police warned the crowds gathering outside the National Guard Armory, now serving as a temporary morgue. That identification would not be easy. North of Beecher, the funnel tracked on through open country along the Flint River, past Genesee and Richfield Center, doing less damage now that it had run out of dense neighborhoods to consume but still tearing apart farmhouses and barns along the way. Without radar data to confirm the mechanism, meteorologists can only infer what happened next. The inflow-outflow balance that had sustained the mesocyclone for 18.5 miles finally broke down, the funnel stretching, thinning, and lifting for good near Five Lakes Road in Lapeer County's Deerfield Township. But the supercell wasn't done yet, within minutes of the first funnel lifting. A second tornado dropped from the same storm almost exactly where the first one had died. This one reached F4 intensity and carved another path through rural Lapeer and St. Clair counties before finally moving out over the open water of Lake Huron, officially logged as a second member of the same tornado family, and, by at least one survey, responsible for one more fatality of its own. By the time it was over, the Flint-Beecher tornado had killed 116 people and injured 844 more, 113 of the deaths concentrated along a 4-mile stretch of Coldwater Road. 55 of the dead were under 20. The youngest was 5 months old. 20 families lost more than one member. It remains, more than 70 years later, the deadliest tornado in Michigan history. And it was, at the time, the last single tornado in the country to kill more than 100 people, a grim distinction it held until Joplin, Missouri, in 2011. National attention that week split 3 ways: toward Waco, Texas, still fresh in memory from May, and toward Worcester, Massachusetts, where the same storm system would kill 94 more people just hours later. Beecher, smaller and less photographed, was often the one left out of the headlines, even though its death toll outran both. In Washington, members of Congress spent weeks debating whether recent atomic bomb tests in Nevada had somehow triggered the outbreak. Congressman James Van Zandt of Pennsylvania was among the most vocal, demanding an official response from the government before meteorologists dismissed the theory outright, and he quietly retracted it. In Flint, the response was immediate. General Motors and the UWA each pledged $100,000 to relief funds within days. That August, thousands of volunteers turned out for a rebuilding effort residence called Operation Tornado, framing new houses along the same streets the old ones had stood on. The following year, the National Civic League named Flint an All-American City for the effort. A monument stands today at the corner of Coldwater and Saginaw, engraved with the names of all